Welcome to today's Software AG webcast titled Loading Data into an EA Tool. Today's webcast will be presented by Jeff Chancellor, Principal Systems Engineer at Software AG. As we move through today's presentation, we invite you to submit any questions that you may have via the Q&A box, which is located on the bottom center of your webcast dashboard. We will address your questions at the end of today's program. In the event that we're not able to answer your question, your submission will be noted, and today's presenter will be back in touch with you as soon as possible. Today's presentation is being recorded. This program recording will be made available to you in an email that will be sent to you within approximately 24 hours. It is now my pleasure to welcome Jeff Chancellor.
Thank you, Will, and thank you everybody for making time in your day for this little webcast. It's certainly a topic that I hear a lot from customers about how do you get data into EA tools. And so again, thank you for your time. Let's start this this show going. So one of the first premises and first requirements that you've really got to understand about inputting data into your EA tool is understanding how your tool stores data in the repository of the database. And EA is really all about the concepts of objects, properties, and relationships. Some common examples are, how do I get all my applications into the EA tool? So an application list is what you need. We also talk about applications and their relationships to other things, such as applications that support business capabilities. And then we'll certainly look at some of the technologies in EA tools. How are technologies used by applications? And then show me the applications that use the technologies. But after this webinar, you should have a better ability to plan and collect and format your data for loading into your EA tool. In this simplified metamodel, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that just to simplify it and understand the basics is that EA is all about the objects that appear in the repository. Those objects can be applications, they can be technologies, they can be your organizations, where your organizations are located, even locations for your data centers. It can be about your business processes as well. And there are structures that, in addition to the objects, that hold these objects, such as application groups, object categories, and then taxonomies, such as we see in the FIAF. For all of those objects, there are properties. These are the descriptors that describe your data, and they have things such as name, ID, a start date, an end date, description, and then a whole a slew of other descriptors such as criticality, complexity, business value, and technical value, just for examples. And between these objects with all their properties, we have the relationships that connect objects to other objects. And often these relationships hold additional business value because they offer insight into impact analysis, such as what are my applications and how are my applications used by organizations? So that insight would be, if an application goes down, what organizations are impacted by that? What I'd like to show you is just a short little picture of these concepts. Now we talk about objects, properties, and relationships, and if we start at the very top, what we're seeing is objects and mandatory properties. In the EA tools that we have here and we offer at Software AG, we have objects and they have a mandatory set of properties for creating a record in the database. And so, for example, those typical mandatory properties are name, version, starting date, ending date, and type of object. So a type would be an application object or a business process object. And an ID, while it's a mandatory thing, you might not have that ID until you actually create it in the repository. So that ID is typically created for you. But these are just the simple mandatory properties that are available or must be provided when you initially load these objects. And then the objects are described by properties and their formats. Now your EA tool should have support for a wide variety of properties and formats. They could be strings, they could be integers, they could be dates, and those dates, that date format will be important a little bit later on as we see. The two other things that we see that are important are a reference property, which is a connection to something else, and a reference array, which is really pointing to a lot of objects connected to another object. Then we can see other formats and properties such as text fields that hold an unlimited amount of descriptive information, images, real, and even Boolean properties. Now, we look at these properties and formats, and then we go to the right, and we see that the objects are connected by relationships, and those relationships have cardinalities attached to them. So we typically see one object is connected to another object, or a one-to-one relationship. We see a one-to-many relationship, and we see many-to-many relationships, or objects connected to a lot of objects. And then there are rules that guide those relationship properties as well. And so what we, this webinar wouldn't be, you know, all it's supposed to be unless we had a picture of a metamodel. So here's a picture of our alphabet conceptual landscape. We divide the metamodel in this rendition into the business architecture area that has objects such as business processes, people, business capabilities, the organizational structure, all the vendors that we do business with, and all the locations where we operate. And then we have the applications here in the orange section, and you see the application is very, very rich, and it has relationships to all of these items up here in the business architecture. And you'll see the cardinality rules, you'll see the rule name and the relationship name. Down here in the lower left, you'll see that an application uses business data and business objects, and it also moves data between applications via information flows. And then we move to the right, an application is connected to a lot of components or technologies that are governed by and provide IT capabilities. And even to the further right, down in the technology area of the architecture, we'll see applications are deployed. There's a set of deployment elements. They're pushed onto a device and a server, and those servers are located in a location. And then in the federal sector, in our government clients, we see projects, we see demands, and we see everything that's impacted by those projects and demands. And so what we'll do is we'll keep this meta model fresh in our mind, because we want to play on the relationships and the properties that are necessary to be collected for the EA tool. So one of the things that I really want to spend just a couple of minutes on is that, mapping your data to your EA tool, sometimes it seems like it should be so straightforward. It's like, if I get a sheet from a customer or an opportunity that says, here's our data that we keep about our applications. We keep the agency name, the agency code of the application, what's its name, descriptions. We keep all the business functions. We keep our contact information, our address locations, our data center locations, our costs, and so on and so on and so on. It just goes on and off the page. And they'll ask, well, how does it map to your EA tool? And I'll spend some time and I'll say, what I notice is that your agency name corresponds to our organization object. It has a name and it also has a code. But one thing is for sure is that most of the time that I get data from an opportunity, there are a couple of gotchas that I need to be concerned about. The first thing is beware of free-form text. And if there's anything I've learned over the years that I've been doing this EA stuff is that people will misspell product names, they'll misspell vendor names, they'll abbreviate company names, they'll abbreviate device names, they will just flat out enter in bad characters. If they're in a hurry, it's not uncommon for me to find misspelled vendors. Microsoft is one of the worst. People will put MS SQL Server. Some people will put Microsoft SQL Server. Some people will, abbreviate SQL Server in different ways, SVR, SER, VER. And so it has a hard time of resolving the free-form text format. Also, what I'll see is that if I have a column over here on the left-hand side that says business functions, what I'll have is a list of business functions separated by commas in one cell of a spreadsheet. And if I know anything that generates some frustration is how do I parse that list of comma separated values and validate that each one is a valid list. The other thing that is one of my gotchas is that I have to help people understand that most EA tools are based on a relationship or a relational model, and they will flatten out the names of other objects and just put it as a string field into an object class. And what I am keen to help people understand is that that is actually a reference property within most EA tools, meaning that that object has a reference to another object through a relationship, and then you can always get the name of that related object back into your UI. But let's not fool ourselves and put it as a string property and then expect to find it as an object reference somewhere else. And then the other thing that I have people help me through is distinguishing between properties that are entered via somebody typing on the keyboard or making a selection off a list versus a calculated property. Calculated property says, well, how many relationships does this application have to other applications? Well, until I get it fully modeled, I don't know what that number is. And sometimes the EA tools will help you and actually do calculations that are actually based on fact rather than ranges of values. It talks to more than 10 applications. And so these are some of the considerations I have for doing this. So what I want to go to next is what is a simple sequence of activities that gets you ready for loading data into your EA tool. And if I ask for a show of hands, how many people participate in data calls, more than one time a year? Most of you would probably raise your hand, but the important part is that you gather the information and to gather all that you can for the objects that you're concerned about and get them in any format that you can, but gather the information and do some initial high-level data cleaning. And in this gather phase, that's your work period to say, let's correct the errors as much as we can ahead of time. I'm not asking for perfection here, but I'm asking you for doing a high-level data cleaning, looking for spelling errors during the gather phase. And then identify and separate the properties, which are the proper attributes for the object, from the relationships or the references between objects. Now that we've done that, you've got your data that you've been keeping about your objects in your EA program. And now you want to align those data points into the EA tool. As with most EA tools that I've seen over the years, there are standard set of properties and attributes for every object class. Alphabet is our primary EA tool. It has a set of standard properties, and then it has a set of extended properties. And then every customer I've been to with Alphabet says, we have these data points that we'd like to capture too. And so I spend a bit of time adjusting the EA tool to handle the customer specific and extended properties. So what I'll do is I will add the custom properties to the EA tool so that now I have a place for every one of the original attributes and properties to be stored in the EA tool. And then what I will do is as a final part of that alignment, I'll make sure that if there are any gaps or redundancies or adjustments required, such as field links. Some people will consider short name 128 bytes long. I consider short name 25 characters long or less. So sometimes there's some negotiation over the adjustments that are needed before you actually prepare for the data loading. Now, in the preparation phase, or getting prepared to do that, what you want to do and what we're going to do today is demonstrate how we're going to use Excel to actually load data into Alphabet. we're going to copy data column by column to ensure the alignment of customer needs to actual EA tool storage locations. And then we'll do some additional data level data cleaning that spots checks. One of the things that I see a lot is the way people's names are stored. I've seen first last, I've seen last comma first. If it doesn't matter to you, it can just be a string, but sometimes it matters for consistency that it all looks better in one format or another. Make sure you prepare your data and get it ready for loading into your tool. And then the last step in this set of sequence is to actually run the importer or the data loader. It's not uncommon that some rows in your data source will get rejected. And so it could be for an invalid data character. It could be for a field length that's too long, or for some other reason. But what we want to do is actually run the import, review the results, and then adjust and finish up the loading. And so if we follow these 4 steps for the process itself, we should be able to easily get our work done and then have data loaded into our EA tool. The first scenario I'm going to show you today is loading objects from a list. And this is what I would call a simple data load, because it's focused on one object class and it's only focused on the basic data necessary to load the data into the repository. One of the things that I want to get familiar with is the level of effort required for me to actually run the loading mechanism. And so if I look at applications, I have customers that have 100 applications. I have some customers that have 800 applications. I have some customers that have upwards of 3,000 applications, and they're all concerned about, oh my gosh, how much is it going to take me to load this data into the EA tool? And I said, if you do these steps right, you'll get very comfortable and you'll find out that you can accomplish the data loading pretty easily. And so if I look at the applications in this large box over here, the ID is going to be assigned when the application is added to the EA tool. What I'm going to load is the name, which is the long name, the common business name of the application, the version, the start date, which was when this application was put into the production environment and started being used by the business, the ending date. Now, the Alphabet is very sensitive about start dates and end dates because it's trying to understand how long will something be around so that I understand when to start planning for its replacement when it nears the end of its end date. And end dates are always expected. They're not absolute. Descriptions are always nice. If I include my description as a part of your mandatory attributes and I say, please describe it in something that somebody can read and make sense of, not this is the accounts receivable application. That doesn't tell me a whole lot, but some of the things we'll see is we'll get data in an Excel format. We'll get the mandatory properties. We'll get the required dates. And sometimes I'll see dates entered as 2017. And I ask, where's the month and the year for that? So be very mindful of what date you're going to use for entering into date fields. What are the supported data types? So as we move into getting ready for this activity, I'm going to define a properties for a data loading sheet that's based on Excel. And this is how Alphabet works, is that we look at the way to create an Excel file that is named and defined for what you want to use it for. And so we want to say this is for applications. We want to say those applications will be in approved status. The class in the METAMODEL is the application class. Give me a sample record. I want to capture the life cycle when I generate this, this template. I can process 10,000 rows at a time, and that's sufficient for most people. I can give a prefix to the Excel file that's generated. I can give a description here for the purpose of the loader. And then what I also want to do is in the data loading spreadsheet itself, I want to create and specify the operation. Is this for creating a new application record in my EA tool? Or is it for updating a record in my EA tool? Or removing a record such as the delete from the EA tool? Or don't process this row, there are no changes required for this row. If I continue to look at the additional fields, I'm going to go across the tabs now. I'm going to look at the list of attributes that are available to be included in this data capture. And what I can do is I can include all the attributes, I can exclude all the attributes, I can selectively define what attributes are mandatory and what attributes not only are mandatory but are included in the data capture template. Now I'm going to show you a live demonstration of this in just a few minutes. But for the application class, I'm also going to look at roles and responsibilities. One of the things I usually find, show me the person or name the person who is considered the application manager. Include that column in the capture template. Also include the organization that is considered the business owner and the organization that's considered the IT owner of the application. The next screen I'm going to look at are the indicators. Now these are the measurements or the qualitative or quantitative descriptors for the application. For example, what's the geographical reach of this application? Is it global? Is it regional? Is it local? That might be a good language there. What's the number of users that typically use this application, or what can it support? That's an item field there. And if I ask for it to include the life cycle, one of the things that I typically need to understand is what are the phases of my life cycle? And in this case, we move from plan to pilot to production to sunset to retired, and then we reach the end date. Once I get that definition completed, I'm going to have my EA tool, if it can, generate me the Excel file for me to fill in. So it knows how to handle and process the data capture template. And then when it finishes generating that template, it downloads it to my computer, and now I can start opening that file and looking at and filling in the data. So what I'd like to do is switch over to the EA tool, and our tool is Alphabet today, and we'll look at how do we use this data capture in Alphabet. Now let's see if I have run through a timeout here, and I think I went too long on my timeout period, so I need to refresh my Alphabet login. I'm going to refresh this. Pardon the wait here for just a minute. Be a good time to make sure you're recording any of your questions. So I've logged into Alphabet, and I'm going to be considered an administrator at this point. And I'm going to come down here in the Alphabet user interface and find the data capture templates. And I'm going to focus on the application class, and I'm going to focus on just the applications by itself. And one of the things that I can do is I can have multiple templates that capture different types of data. If I want to capture just the basics, what I can do is I'm going to say I just want to capture the basics. And so I'm going to look at the definition of creating that template. I named the template just the basics. Its file name is predicated by just the basics. I'm going to look at what properties I want to capture. So I want to look at name, version, start date, end date, and that must include those in the template. And that's all I'll capture from the attributes. I'll capture role types. I'll capture the business owner and the application manager. I won't capture any indicators, and I won't capture any life cycles, just the basic data. Now what I want to do is then click OK. I want to generate that template, and it's going to generate this file. And what it's going to have are samples in there that I can look at and add new applications or adjust applications for the database. Let's let it generate this file so that it's ready for downloading. Once I download the file, I can open it up and look at the Excel properties. And now I can, what I like to do is just to make sure I get the width of the columns, you know, that I can read them here and there. It holds my dates. It's got my reference ID of the applications that are already in the database. I can put the name in here. I've got plenty of room to put the name. I've got a version, a start date, an end date, the organization that's the business owner, and the person who's considered the application manager. Now what I want to do is I want to insert a row here. And let's just say I'm going to insert a row. And what I want to do is make no changes to all of the records here. And it stops at that row. I want to make no changes for everything that's below here down to the end. Now, notice I've got 405 rows in this field, but I want to now create a new record, and I want to provide this information. This is Jeff's sample application. And version is 2.5. It started 1/1/2020. It'll end of 6/6/2024. The business owner of this application is, say, contract management. And the person who is the application manager, notice I'm given a drop down. So Alphabet has already created a list of the people that are in the database and offered them as new people that I can choose from. What I'll now do is I'll save this file, and I'm going to go back into Alphabet, and I'm going to say what I want to do is bring in this file with its new changes. Choose the file, and what I'll do is look in the downloads, and this is the file that I just created. Notice it was marked by just basics at the beginning. I'll open that file and upload the results. And when I see that that's processed, it had 410 records, it had 411 records, and it was processed all 411, and it looks like one new one was added. In Alphabet, I'm going to look for Jeff's sample application, and here's the application that I've just created and put into Alphabet. And now it's got the start date and the end date, the name and the version. All the other fields are waiting to be managed and modified in Alphabet. Now, if I go back to this home page now and come back into the data capture template, I'll show you one more that is the extent of how these applications can grow. What you'll see here is this is the regular application record. Class properties, there's quite a number of class properties in here that are not only, you know, items that are suitable for, you know, federal government customers, but also items that we've added as custom properties for describing applications. And so this, you can exclude all, you can include all, you can reset to how it started on the beginning, and you can specify all the different role types, the indicators, and then if you wanted to create life cycles, it's just include what life cycle you wanted to create. So this little demonstration helped us understand that for the different types of artifacts and objects that are in the database, for example, if you want to capture devices or business units or organization units, components, vendors, information flows, people, interface systems, there's a data capture template that can be configured to help you get data into your tool set. The next thing we're going to look at is we're going to get back into this presentation and continue on, and we're going to look at scenario number 2, objects with relationships. And one of the things that we do often is we connect, the dots. You've heard that saying a lot with EA, but we're connecting the dots, and actually we're making relationships and establishing relationships for a business reason between 2 different objects. And so in this example, what we'll see are business capabilities, and we'll see applications. Those are the 2 types of objects. And we'll see one relationship that is the supports relationship that's actually a many-to-many relationship. So an application supports many business capabilities. And then a business capability is supported by 0 or more applications. And so in this particular example, we'll see supports and supported by. So we have to have a consideration for that. And then another relationship, we'll show a couple of examples. We'll see that business capabilities are governed, a business capability governs 0 or more applications, and applications are governed by none or one business capability. And governed means a special thing in some EA circles. It's the primary reason that an application exists. And maybe that business capability is human resources. That's the primary reason, although the applications can support more than just human resources in the supported relationship. So what we'll do is we'll get down into the difference between the data capture template and what its properties are. And so in Alphabet, what we have is, say, an application to business process or business capability is the name of the objects that we want to connect. The base class is the anchor object as far as I can see. It's an application object. The reference class or the referenced object is the business process. And the reference array property is application processes business process. What we'll do is permitted operations are update or delete or no change. And then this is the only data that we need to specify for these establishing relationships. What we will see in this sample is that there are applications that are listed, and in Alphabet we need a way to specify the applications and how they're identified with their version, and also the business process names, preceded by its prefix and numerical ID. What we're going to do is we're going to update a couple of relationships and establish some new relationships in this next example in our sheet. So that's what we're going to try to do here. And so demonstration number 2, we'll switch back over to Alphabet, and we'll go back into the tool set, and we'll look at applications. And instead of looking at a class object, we're going to look at a reference template. And we're going to look at the application to business process relationship. Now, if I were to edit this, this is what you just saw on the screenshot. We're going to have applications included in the template, as well as the list of business processes included in the template. In our template, we have 400 unique, 405 or 406 now unique applications. And so all those will be brought into the the Excel template, and all the business processes, and we probably have, probably 150 or so business processes defined. And so we will look at that and select OK. Now, what I've got already defined is a file for business processes and applications. And so in this Excel sheet, what we'll see is that, here's an update, and I'm going to change the business process for which profit and loss, processes. I'm going to change that to decision support. And I'm also going to mark a change for this Jiva application. I'm going to switch it from no change to an update. And I'm going to select the process that Jiva, the application, defines. And I'll say it supports end-to-end service level management. Now, I've got 3 changes in here so far. I can come down here and say Powerhouse, the application supports which business process, and it will support the business strategy planning process. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to an update, and then I'm going to copy this row, and I'm going to insert this copied cells so that Powerhouse now supports not only business strategy planning, but it supports alliance planning as well. I'm going to save this file. I'm going to jump back into Alphabet, and I'm going to say, let's process this import file. Select the file template, go look through the list of files. And I know it's application to process that was just edited. Open this and upload the results. And now I've got some additional records that were processed, 596 records. And if I go back into my applications and process, I'm going to go find the Powerhouse and make sure that I'm supporting 2 business processes. So back in Alphabet, I'm going to find the Powerhouse application. I'm going to navigate to it, look at the business context information, and see that now I have the business strategy planning and alliance planning as supported process. So I've shown you a couple of different ways to load data into the tool sets. Granted, it's not a 1-minute exercise or a 10-minute exercise. It requires a nice set of steps and a nice set of plans. These templates are also useful for not only loading data into your tool set from the initial get-go, but also for removing a set of applications or even updating a set of applications in bulk if the need arises. The final reminders I'd like to leave you with is that the steps are gather your information, align it to your EA tool, prepare your import load sheets, run the importers. What you need to do is plan and practice and test and be prepared to repeat these steps and repeat this cycle if your organization and agency is undergoing a lot of change. The next step, and probably one of our next webinars, is once you've got this data loaded into your tool set, what kind of dashboards and visualizations would you want to prepare so that you can see that newly loaded data? And with that, I'm going to say that is what I've wanted to talk about today in this webinar. And if you have any questions, I hope you've given them to Will, and we'll take on those questions at this point in time. Will, it's yours.
Thank you, sir. Very interesting presentation up to now. We're going to take the opportunity to ask everybody that if you have questions, if you're sitting on them, please put them into the Q&A box on the lower left of the dashboard at this point. I have one question to give you at this point, Jeff, and that is as follows. Can I add custom properties when I ask Alphabet to generate a capture template for the data uploader?
What you will need to do is to add those custom properties to Alphabet before you generate the template. so that the template generator knows that those are attributes that are going to be for the object class that what you're considering. The reason we do that is that I've seen too many times where you might have an end user who doesn't know the meta model and doesn't know the rules for adjusting the meta model. And since this is a shared repository, we'll let an administrator go in there to the Alphabet configuration utility, add the custom properties and custom attributes, define their field links and their field types, and then we'll save that configuration change, and then we'll generate the template. And those attributes then are permanently attached to the object class that was just modified.
Okay, excellent. Well, we didn't get any additional questions during that period of time, so we are going to remind and invite everybody that is with us today to please keep abreast of all of the programs that we are planning in support of our federal, state, and local markets. You can check out these planned programs into the future by visiting the events page under the company tab at softwareag.com, and you can register for these programs with one click. Jeff, thank you so much for a very interesting presentation today and for your time. Thanks to everybody that has joined us. Our program has now ended. Enjoy the rest of your day.